All right, howdy folks. Welcome back to Top Comics Pressing. This is going to be a pre-screen video here, and we've got about 50 comics in the stack. There's a whole mix of Amazing Spider-Mans from the late 70s, early 80s. We've got some X-Men, a couple of Wolverines, and a couple of True Moderns with some other 90s goodness mixed in. And so we got kind of a true mixture here. And the owner of this stack is looking for CGC 9/6s. And the first one up here is going to be an Amazing Spider-Man number 200. And so this one is going to be coming from 1979. It's a Ramita anniversary issue, and it flashes back some all the way to Amazing Fantasy 15. Not a bad issue overall to have in the PC, as most people are huge Amazing Spider-Man fans, so who can blame them for that? Now, looking at the condition of this, you'll notice that this is a square-bound copy, and if I open that on up, it does mean that on the interior there, you can see that there is staple down in there, kind of right above where that red truck is. I don't want to open it up too much because you can cause a little bit of a reader crease by doing that, but letting the light curl of gravity with my thumb under here helps support it. You can see all the way down. Now, those staples mean that they are physically bulging out of right here and down here, and that means that there's no really good way to press around these staples. You can't really get stacking materials all the way because it's glued on the edges, and then where the staples are, you know, you can kind of buffer them, but there's always going to be some distortion from that staple pushing up into whatever you buffer it. That makes pressing these square bounds a little bit more challenging, and so I have a video on that. I believe also CGC goes a touch looser on these because some of the defects are inherent to how they were manufactured, not a function of how they were handled or stored. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so as we look at this particular copy, there's two white hashes right here that look like surface scratches. Those don't look like they're production. There's some goop on here on the green box that might clean off, but to me that looks like it is going to be a delicate one. As you search the corners and the spine, you can see that there's a white tick down there. I've seen that on a couple of other issues, including, this one. And so that might be overlooked as a production thing. What I wanted to draw your attention to is how the cover over here is rolled over that corner. So that's called an overhang because the cover is physically longer than the inner stack. And so as long as this slides up against and abuts something, that cover is forced to curl under. You can press it out, but it will recurl almost always by the time it makes it back home to the owner, because when it's slid into the CGC case and then bounced around on a FedEx truck, it'll inevitably push against the side of that inner well, and it tends to fold under anyway. And so even though they look really sharp coming out of the press, by the time they're returned to me, almost every time it's started to curl back under. You can see right here that there's a little chip out, and that actually goes all the way through the issue. So if you follow that all the way back, there is a little bit of damage there. And if we look on the corner here, there definitely is a clear crease there on that corner. And so these little defects are going to add up. All of this schmutz, hopefully we can do our best to dry clean off, so that's not really going to be an issue. But what I think is going to be an issue is the slight tearing that goes all the way through the issue there, as well as kind of a folded over right there. And so to me, this one is going to be a bounce if we're looking for the very highest grades. But, I'm always happy to be overridden if the owner so chooses. I offer a service, and so I offer my opinion, but it's not binding. This one looks a little bit sharper as we look all the way through there. There's one color breaking tick down here. There's a little bit of damage on the staples, but nothing too much. If even without the gloss there, though, if you look straight down at that staple, you can see a white line, and so that means the staples are already pushing physically through the cover. And if it pushes all the way through, that's going to be a defect. And you can see that right here where there's a little bit of a puncture hole. So right there, you can see the silver of the staple. And so those things are what kind of distinguish a 9/6 from a 9/8 sometimes, and you can see that down here. The bigger issue on this one, though, is going to be that the corner over here. You might say that that's not color breaking because it's on white, and it looks like it should press a little bit. But what I'm looking for there is a little bit of a matte line in the center of that line, in the center of that crease. And if I can see matte, that means that the gloss is broken. And even after a press, you're still going to be able to see that line. And then that's going to be enough for CGC to call that entire thing a corner crease. And so I would imagine that this one would come back like an 8.0 copy, even after the press and an iron there. Sometimes you're really, really lucky and they come out. But typically, if they're that deep, they're really hard to get all the way out. So there we go. There's a good look at it. So I would also put that one in the bounce pile. Next on up here is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 180, and so again we can look across the corner there. Now this is a slight production tear, and if you look on the interiors of these old books, you'll often see that the corner is torn, so you can see that kind of all through there. That's production, and CGC will often ignore that. So if you're coming to comic books from trading cards, you know, PSA is much stricter on how the card was printed and manufactured in addition to how it was handled or manipulated. Comic books, unfortunately, are not a single sheet of cardboard, right? We have a cover attached to inner pages, which are held together with staples all the way in the middle, and you can see those staples there. And because of that, there's a lot more defects that go into the production, and comic books were also printed back in the day at the speed of light as cheaply as possible with little regard to their long-term collectability, and so very little effort was put into their precision, and because of that, in comic book grading, those simple production flaws are overlooked. And so this little production flaw there is called a binary tear. When this was folded and cut, that little chip was created. That's normal, and that is allowable at a 9.8. This one's got a little bit of a spine tick down there, but I think this one will press up really nicely. All this schmutzies here will have to dry clean off, so that's all gonna have to get dry cleaned. I'll do that off camera. You can see that this corner is crunched, and we'll do our best to press it, but I don't think that that needs any particularly special attention other than some dry clean and a press. Next on up here is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 186. This one has some light reader creasing over here, so you can see that those white dots with the slight line there, so that's going to automatically limit the grade with the reader crease. And if you look at it, there's going to be a number of other defects here kind of in the glare. Now, a lot of those will press out. It's just a question of how many of them, and will you get all of them? And really, these white dots with a little bit of line across there, we know are not going to press out because we can see the white. So that's going to be color breaking, and it's going to be permanent. And other things like this, you know, are probably going to press to look better. But again, in the middle of all of that, you're going to see a little bit of it after the press. And the reason for that is at that center of the V, you're not going to see it. But, you know, if there's a crunch and it's bent there, when you flatten that out, you can kind of see how my wrist unrolls. And it's right in that crease, right in the center of it, as you unroll it and flatten it, that the gloss is going to be damaged. So this one I would put a pass on and put in the decline bucket if we're looking for the very high grades. So coming on up next here is Amazing Spider-Man number 189. This is all the way back in 1978. So this still counts as a modern, and amazingly it still goes under the same grading criteria as something that came out in 2024. And so that's kind of crazy if you think about these things had to sit around for decades before anybody got a hold of them, and these things came out well before CGC. So right here, you know, we're going to have a little bit of a dust shadow at the top there. So if you look at the color, you can see a little bit, and there's going to be a little bit more over here where you can see a dust shadow. Now this would whiten. I don't know if it's financially worth it to the owner to do the whitening to try to remove the dust shadow. Part of the reason I say that is even if we remove that dust shadow, I'm not totally convinced that this one would be a 9.8 copy. And the reason for that is that there is some slight indenting and bending and creasing up here. And I think if you look in the middle of that yellow right there, you can see some white come through. So let me see if I can get that in the glare. It's being stubborn, but there is a crease up top there. That's pretty small. Could be worth it. Could be worth a dice roll. You know, oftentimes I have some clients that are much more conservative and would prefer to pass and let things go. Other people are much more aggressive and would prefer to roll the dice on stuff. So, you know, sometimes it's dealer's choice. All right, this one looks pretty sharp to me. Now you'll notice that up here, there is very little of the white border showing, and by the time you get down here, there's much more of it. The staples are on the sides, so that one, if anything, is pulled towards the back. And so if we pulled more of the back cover under, we would actually drag that staple further onto the back cover. And right up here, that one's pretty much smack dab right on the spine. And so this is not a spine roll. This is a miswrap, and we'll see a lot more examples of that here because it's very common in the 1970s. You can also see another binary tear up here in the form of this chip. That should be overlooked in a 9.8. Batman 404 is one that's notorious for almost always having a pretty aggressive staple or a binary tear. But this miswrap is normal, and as long as it's not too aggressive or egregious, it should be overlooked by CGC. For the particularly picky collectors, you might want to check that not all 9/8 are created the same, and so you'll often hear veterans say collect the book, not the grade, and it's because some people really hate that miswrap, and it's very challenging to find books that are perfectly wrapped, particularly from this era. It's also a reason when you're comparing sales data without scans of the books, you know, you might wonder why there's such high variance or why people overpaid for a book on a different platform, but you know, if it had a perfect spine and that's what's important to the collector, it might be worth a few extra bucks to them. All right, next on up here is Amazing Spider-Man number 192. This one's a pretty sharp copy, I thought, overall. You can see this little piece of the paper that's totally going to fall off by the time it gets to CGC, but these are little gripper tears that are on the interior there. Again, those are normal for the production process, and there's nothing crazy about that. CGC will absolutely overlook that. The other thing that's going to be noteworthy is this, I believe, is distributor overspray. So that is paint added before the point of sale on that book, and that really bothers some people, but it was also a normal process in the late 70s, and so there's not a whole lot that can go on with there. Sometimes CGC overlooks it, sometimes they ding it. In this particular issue, I would overlook it, but there you go. Oh, one other thing I'll point out is if you look as we scan the glare kind of right across from Spider-Man's butt to the spine, you'll see that there's a little bit of that indent there that's called a stacking curl, and if we stand this on the edge, you can see it's not flat. So that stacking curl is because this thing was stacked, and the book was eventually kind of fully bent up all the way, and you build up this few degree curl to it for being outside of a board for 10 years or whatever. So definitely something to watch for there. This one here has a lighter miswrap, but you can still see it's bigger on the bottom than it is on the top. But overall, again, this one is a super sharp copy that I think I would happily clean and press. You see that there's a little bit of light surface dirt back here. You know, this little bit of corner where I usually see CGC overlook is part of the cutting process, and nothing too crazy going on down there. So I think that one's going to be a really nice sharp copy for an Amazing Spider-Man number 193 from 1979, so decades ago. Here again, you have another little evidence of the overhang. So the cover, you know, if you look at that, there is, you know, kind of bent both on the corner and on that top edge, and that's because it doesn't perfectly overlap the wraps. Again, we have another light binary tear you can see up there. Again, overlooked. This one has a very much cleaner wrap on the side. Down here on the bottom corner, again, it does have that overhang with a little bit of edge wear, and you can see that on the interior that there's some chipping in there, but again, that is quite normal for the era, nothing crazy there. Again, that all should be overlooked by CGC, and again, we'll need a little bit of dry cleaning. Now, this is technically the start of a dust shadow, but that is about the smallest dust shadow I've ever seen, and I would hope CGC would forgive that and just not even note it or be concerned with it. So I would send that one on in. Right here is ASM 196, so very clean spine in terms of miswrap and alignment on this one, which is great. Little bit of overhang there in the top corner. You can see that the back cover is actually even showing out there, so it's not trimmed, it's just stapled slightly crooked, or you know, cut slightly crooked, so nothing too crazy there. You know, maybe the world's smallest crease up there in the top corner, but you definitely can have a 9/6 with those very light creases. You know, a little bit of creasing there, but that should pop out when you press it and inflate the spine with a little bit of stacking material. So really nice copy there. These, by the way, are the late 70s direct copies with that slash mark through there. So as they transitioned from newsstand to direct, that slash meant that it could not be returned from a comic book store. So those are direct copies. A little bit later on, they go to the Spider-Man head logo, which I think is graphically much more appealing. But this one now is almost miswrapped the other way, where that date, which is supposed to be on the front cover, is actually along the spine, and you can actually see some of the front cover on the back cover. So, you know, these can be miswrapped in both directions. I would personally prefer having too much front cover with front cover on the back cover than the other way around. And if you look here, this looks like initially it might be some damage, but it's actually pixelated, and so that's part of the, you know, the material Spider-Man's been thrust upon. So that one looks really sharp to me. This one is an Amazing Spider-Man number 205, and if we check it on out from the front here, it looks pretty good, running all the way down, right up the spine here. Definitely some dirt that needs to be dry cleaned off there. What I think was limiting about this one is the back top corner here. If we check that out, it's definitely blunted, and you can see that there's a little bit of micro creasing in there. So again, depending on how bullish you want it to be, there's also a very little bit of light staple rust and tarnish down here, so you can see that right there. So in principle, if CGC flags that, the max grade you should get for even, you know, this very modest amount of staple tarnish or rust should be a 9.4. They do overlook it or miss it on some books. You know, this one's black, very early black cat, might even be the second black cat. So if the owner wanted that one pressed, I would not fault them at all. I think that would probably be worthwhile, but you know, with that staple rust, I think it'll probably peg at a 9.4, especially with the back. Now this one's a very aggressive miswrap, so you can see that there is a large amount of white here on the front cover of this one. Often I'll get requests from people asking me to correct that or spine roll it, fix it. But if you look on the back, you can see all of this black line was supposed to be cut off. And so there's extra cover on the back. And so right now the front cover and the back cover are lined up, and the staples are ostensibly on the side of the comic. And so if I, you know, rolled this so this line were even on the front cover, I would have to drag the cover, you know, this way. And if I did that, I would actually be pulling the bottom out, because they're lined up right now. So if I move the front this way and refold it, that means the back cover's got to, you know, roll under, and that would make for an unsightly book where you'd see news wrap here sticking out. And so you do not want to do anything with these miswraps. It's probably one of the biggest misconceptions I get from requests from clients is to correct books like this that are miswrapped and not spine rolled. All in all though, obviously some light dry cleaning is needed here on the corners, that kind of stuff, so that's all cool. There's a very, very little bit of light edge wear. That's normal for a book of this era. That's just from when it was chopped, and so I would go ahead and send that one. In principle, CGC should ignore that miswrap. I have actually received a 9.6 book with miswrap being the only grade or note, and so that was kind of frustrating. All right, this one is Amazing Spider-Man number 212. So this is the first appearance of the Hydro Man, one of the Spider-Man villains who appeared. So there's some, you know, defects in here. It's kind of a deep finger bend. You can kind of see in general those press out. Again, we got our miswrap down the side, so nothing too crazy there. If we look at the front top corner, that's okay. Front bottom corner has a little bit of creasing that's folded under, and you can actually see white in there. If you flip it on over though, that's going to be a deeper corner crunch, and so that would probably need to be ironed out. And this one definitely would need to be ironed out. You can see how deep that corner is in there, and that's going to go all the way through. So you can see that several pages deep in there if you look at it. Over here you're going to have something quite similar. Now this bottom black here is going to show all the damage, and so that's really going to preclude the grade, and this is going to be an honest crease here. So even though you can press that crease, again you can see the matte line in there going all the way through it, and because of that I don't think that that'll press out even after I iron it. And even if you miss that bigger crease, you know, you'd still be able to see all that corner damage that's accumulated there. And this one has a much more severe stacking curl, which would be this vertical line right there, you can kind of see. And so all in all, I think this one's going to be a really tough stretch to get up to that 9.6. Very nice book, one, you know, I would perfectly be happy with in my PC. It's a very nice white bright copy, so I mean that page quality is immaculate from a book from, you know, 1980. So it's, you know, 45 years ago roughly, and so very, very you know, nice copy, nice newsstand, but I don't think it'll hit that highest CGC grade. Up here is going to be our Avengers number 144. Right off the bat, you'll notice that there is a couple of lines right up there, and so that's going to be a flag for us. There's going to be some light creasing down here in the corner, and that's actually going to break color. So there's going to be multiple light corner creases on there. We're going to have multiple other spine ticks here by Captain America. Now CGC does spine ticks based on quantity and severity, and because you can see some of that white popping out of that spine tick, that one's going to get hit with kind of a moderate level of severity. It's one that you can see from arm's length, you know, kind of clearly if you just move it on over and pop it up. So there's, you know, quite obvious on that one. And then if you look over here, you know, that's going to be a little bit more than a binary tear with whatever that is. And then I thought there was, another defect or two on this one, but this one should come in, you know, relatively high grade, particularly for a copy from 1976. So this one's still technically a modern, which is insane, and it's a beautiful copy for that. I just don't think it'll hit that 9.6 with the two big spine ticks, the little bit of a crease up there, and the corner smush. So I put that one down. Amazing Spider-Man number 200. Again, we've already seen a couple of these. I've already explained kind of the little bit there. This one does not have the edge wear, but it does have actual corner creasing. So that other one that rolled over, you know, it didn't have any white showing, but this one clearly has the white and the crunch up there. And so I think that's going to be limiting. We do have that same pesky white dot, which I think is a production flaw on these. And everything else looks good. We have a little bit of that red, but not as much. Little bit of, again, the world's lightest dust shadow. If you look there, you can see a little bit of a contrast. Maybe I have to bring it all the way up. There's a little bit of a yellow versus the white. These are not punching all the way through as much, but you can see it's starting to. And then down here we have a little bit of honest corner creasing again. So that's gonna be, it's gonna be a pesky issue. Again, if you wanted to roll the dice on these, we could. It's just going to be, I think, a little bit harder of a sell. Now, a lot of people think you can press this kind of stuff out here where it's actually indented or blunted there on the corner. As far as I know, the only way to fix that is to actually melt all the glue on the inside and then kind of manually squeeze it and play with it. That is very pokey, and it also has the risk of making everything look a lot worse if you shift stuff and get it stuck there. And so I've experimented with doing that, but I've kind of voted against it. All right, I'm going to take a quick pause here for a water break. Cool, we're back. All right, Amazing Spider-Man number 216. Again, not a really bad wrap. Looks pretty clean, pretty standard for the era. Corners look relatively sharp. There's a little bit of light bending there on that top corner. You can kind of see right there. But that'll flatten out in the press, hopefully. It does go all the way through the book. So if I hold it on its side, you can see the pages pop on out there. I think that'll press out. So again, I'm gonna just gently roll it the other way and look for a matte line in there. And I think if I hold it, I've got my hand supporting the spine, so that'll be fine. I think we'll be able to get that through with an iron. So that one will need an iron to go for it, but I think it'll be all right. Again, there's some guesswork in this because you have to imagine what the book's gonna look like after the press while you're doing the work before the press, and so you know, you kind of have to have some experience for what that's all going to look like. This one again has our world's lightest dust shadow up there, so you can kind of see that up top. If I can get it to focus in on the dust shadow, maybe you can see right there. Yeah, it's really being stubborn to focus in on the book. What if I put it right here? Yeah, there we go. So you can kind of see that yellow line up top. So that could be whitened. In principle, those dust shadows are supposed to limit you to a 9.4. I've seen plenty of them that if they're super small and super light like this, sometimes they do not get mentioned. Little bit of a crunch down there on the bottom corner. Nothing too weird about that. So all in all, this one's in pretty nice shape. I will point out that this gunk here is under the gloss, and so that's part of the printing. So if you look, you can see that right there. You'll get these random patches of ink on a number of issues from the era, and so again, that's unfortunately a normal part of the production process. It's nothing too crazy. In principle, CGC should overlook that as a production flaw and not hit it too hard. So here's a little bit more on the next one. So this was a couple issues before at Amazing Spider-Man number 11, and that's going to be some more of that random ink splatter. It's going to be normal because, again, comics were printed super cheap. This one's got a beautiful spine alignment, so you can see that. Full comic book code authority really showing, so that's really nice. Again, nothing too crazy here on the back, just some light defects. So definitely worth a clean and a press, but nothing too insane. Next on up here is Amazing Spider-Man 209, Kraven. Kraven's one of my favorite Spider-Man rogues. The whole character's kind of goofy in my opinion, and I really love Kraven's Last Hunt. It's one of the ultimate, I think Mike Zeck artwork is just great all the way around. So, and here we have a little bit of a tear up top. Now, I don't know what CGC will do with that because it does break color on the inside, but the overall, that's like maybe 2 millimeters on both sides. So it should, if it does cause a ding in grade, be a 9.6 in my opinion. There's nothing else really crazy going on here. So, maybe again, the world's most lightest dust shadow back there, but nothing too crazy. So I'd press it and roll the dice. Maybe I'm just biased because it's a Craven issue. Amazing Spider-Man 208. Front cover looks really good all in all. The black border up top here is pretty indicative of any damage. You'll notice that it's a little speckly over there. That's normal printing or color, so nothing too crazy there. This one has the miswrap where now it's wrapped too much on the back cover, but again, the pages are lined up. The staples are roughly lined up, or at least as lined up as they can get, and so again, relatively high grade copy of Amazing Spider-Man 208. Coming on up here is Amazing Spider-Man 207. Nothing too insane on the front. Looks pretty clean all in all. There we go, so you can kind of see all the gloss. This one has, I think, a little bit heavier of a dust shadow that will get pegged. It's a much bigger and it's more noticeable in person. I think this one also had a few specks of staple rust. So if you look down here, you can see that the silver is in the middle there and on the edges, but you can see the dark patches. So at least in principle, this one should be a 9.4 in my opinion, based on the CGC gradebook. So I'd probably decline that, both from the dust shadow and the light staple rust. Either of them will get you to 9.4, and if you remove both of them, you might still be 9.6. So who knows? Okay, so here we have Hydro Man. This is going to be some spine surface wear there. I might have to, thinking about how that's going to dry clean off, I think there might just be too much scuffing along the spine there. I definitely can try to rub or erase some of the black in there, but the white that's showing on the black you won't be able to do anything about. So that's gonna have there a nice binary tear up top, nothing too crazy. It'd be a dice roll. So this one here, a little bit more staple damage. If you look, there's some color rubber on the staple. There's a clear few spine ticks there. What really does this one in though is the really light creasing up top here. So you can see that there's 2 creases and both of those are going to kill it. So the first really small one would only limit to a 9.6, but that next one in is going to knock it back down. So that's probably a 9.0 copy, just based on those creases up top. 1 spine tick, 2 spine ticks, 3 spine ticks. You're going to be a 9.6 range on this, but if that's all that there is, I might actually, this one's got some creasing on the back corner back here too, so that's probably going to be hard. You can see it right in there in the glare. Looks like 2 kind of crisscrossing creases, and there is some damage down here. Now in principle that could press out, but I think with the combination of the clear spine ticks with the other creasing up top, that would bounce that one. Amazing Spider-Man 221 here. This one has something unusual. So the top staple is slightly rusted, which is normal. The bottom staple, though, if you look, there is a staple in there, but there's also 2 more staple holes. Now, it was not uncommon to have a comic book produced with a second set of staples. That could happen, but having the staple holes without the staple is going to be means somebody did something or monkeyed with it from CGC's perspective. So I think that one we're going to bounce. All right, this one looks pretty sharp overall, so hopefully you're getting a little bored of me just showing you nice sharp Amazing Spider-Mans from the era. A little bit of dirt up here to clean off, no evidence, a little bit of maybe a micro corner crease down here. So my gut would be on a 9.6 on that one, with that very clear bottom corner crease. Amazing Spider-Man 223. This again is another one of these things of production ink, so I can try to get that out of the white box. I wouldn't count on it. There's a little bit of discoloration here where the blue started to turn to green in there. I doubt that that'll get noted. Again, that red that's in there is going to be production ink. The dark blue, black, that's all going to get cleaned off. That corner looks bent, but it does not look creased, which is a good sign. And the same thing is true down there. And again, all of this will just have to be dry cleaned off. So this one I think I've got a good feeling about. The Superman here that's in the random in the middle does have a stacking curl, so if I put that down there, you can clearly see where the gloss hits it as it starts to bend up, and so that again is going to be our stacking curl. Different than a spine roll, stacking curls you can just smash out with a normal press. This one's going to have a little bit of a crease up here. Get the camera to focus in on it. It does break color. There's a little bit of a color crease up there that does break color. And then this one has a much more noticeable dust shadow. And this one's actually going to be a twofer. So there's one line that comes across here, and there's going to be a second line going up here. So whatever was stacked on top of this. And that's how this comes into play, is this thing's going to be sitting in an attic, and there's going to be another comic book that's going to sit right here. And then the white part that's exposed is what's going to get tanned or discolored. And the part that's covered by the issue on top of it is going to be protected by that issue. And there's a little bit of a lighter one here and a darker one going this way. And so that one I would bounce. The dust shadow in principle could be cleaned, but I think with the other damage it's probably not going to be a 9/8, so it probably won't be worth it. Predator does have some crinkling or crumpling here. Hopefully that'll come out right by my thumb. It doesn't look like it's too bad. It might be creased in there, but I'm optimistic it'll look really nice. There is a little bit of color rub down here, so if you look across the back, you can see all that white on the blue. That happens because somebody takes their bag and their board and they drop the comic in it, and the comic slides down the backer board, and so you don't want to do that. You want to pull the board out, put the comic on it, and then put both in the bag at the same time so that the comic's not rubbing along the board. That color rub, especially if you're a Marvel fan from like 2014, you're going to be really upset because all your books are going to have that color rub, and you're going to see it when you pull them out of the bag and the board. So anyway, still a popular enough issue. Another thing about these you want to check is that there were more printings. This is a rare book that actually says parenthesis first printing parenthesis. Traditionally, first prints are stated by the absence of a different printing number. In this case, they did actually say first printing. All right, this is a hard 9/8 to get. Again, you can see that there's overhang there. So this is one of the first appearances of Gambit. It's contested if it's this or if it's Uncanny 266. I don't really care to enter that fray. But what I will say is this one's a hard 9/8 to get because it's a pesky square bound again. This one was produced without staples, so later on these are just glued, which works out quite nicely. This one does have a couple of spine ticks. There's one there, there's one there. You can press it flat, but you're still going to see the spine tick in there, and so I would bank on a 9/6 on that one. Uncanny 184. I've got a couple of these at CGC myself, and so I would be optimistic to see it. This one does have pretty significant what I would call staple tarnish or oxidation, so it's not full rust, but it definitely does not have any shine to it. It has a white dull look to it, and that should in principle bump it to a 9/4. Again, happy to press and roll the dice, but my gut on that would be a 9/4 if CGC sticks to their prior precedent. This one's a nice newsstand here from the early 90s. I didn't notice anything on this one. These often have now started to kind of slightly discolor if they were stored in like a storage unit, but none of the normal kind of defects that you would associate with this book. So feeling good about that one. Uncanny 139. Again, this is going to be production ink, so that was not surface rub in that black. It's just the toner not being fully filled out. This is also going to be a production line, so don't go too crazy trying to dry clean that off. All in all, super sharp on the corners. This one is crunched under. We'll see if we can get that uncreased. There's a little bit of some white fuzz down here. Some of that is super light edge wear, but all in all, I would gladly gamble this one on a 9/6 or above. Daredevil 158 here, so I think this is the first Frank Miller Daredevil, or at least it's one of the very early ones. A little bit of a crunch under there, and so that again is normal part of the overhang. This one right here has two small stains though. So if you can see that in the glare right on the word shirts across the top, and there's another one right here, kind of the edge of that red. In principle, I might be able to comic clean those better. We'll see and take a gamble at it. I would say this one's a popular enough issue that you might as well roll the dice on. This one here is going to need some ironing, so there's a pretty deep bend in there. If I do my job right and iron that out, that'll go down as light spine stress lines after I take it all the way out. There is a much deeper bend through there. That looks like it's a pretty intense stacking line. Hopefully that'll come out with the press. It is long and it's real, but it does not feel deep. So I'm optimistic that'll come out with the press. There's a very, very light staple rub across the back there too. So that you can kind of see that across there. So again, that's from sliding it along a backer board instead of putting the comic on the board and sliding that in the bag. This one I got a good feeling about. There definitely is some light rippling to it, so it does need a press, but all in all, it looks super sharp. This is one of the polybag issues, and there was no polybag crease on this one that I could see. You can see some more light distortion down here, and so all that needs to get gently pressed out. Some more right in here. But good news is no polybag crease. Personal favorite of mine, so I actually have a 9.8 of this with the Secret Wars 8 logo. It's kind of cool. I like it. First appearance Jubilee here. Again, nothing too crazy on the front, looks fairly sharp. What is hard about this is that 20 is on gloss and color, so I don't know if I'll be able to get that out. Lots needs to be pressed out here. I don't know if this will hit a 9.6 or not. There is several spine ticks kind of on the back, and the back does cause a problem for that, but you know, it is a key X-Men issue, and so I would probably roll the dice on it and see what CGC says. I would definitely gamble 9.4, 9.6. All right, this sets the world record for my least favorite comic book to press. Nope, I take that back. Marvel Spotlight number 5 is definitely my least favorite to press. This is a runner-up. It's a deceptively challenging modern, both to get in a 9.8 and to press. And the reason for that is it actually has 2 sets of inserts. So right under the cover is a business reply mail, and that goes all the way there. But if you go to the centerfold, there's a second insert. And this right here is going to show aging of the book based on the newsprint here. And so if you open that on up, it's clearly a different color. So that's going to be one of our giveaways that this book was aged a little bit. But because there are 2 inserts, that means it is significantly fatter on that top staple than it is on the bottom staple. And normally what you would do to deal with an insert to buffer it from the cover is put more stuff under the front cover and the back cover. But you can't do that on this one because the cover stock is also super crappy. It is bad paper. And you can already start to see the staple tears there and underneath how embedded that staple is. And if you puff this thing up, you're going to sink that top staple and take your 9.6 book all the way to a 9.2 or 9.4 book lower if you really damage the top staple. And so this one you have to back the pressure off quite significantly. You have to be very careful with your buffers, and so I used 2 cardstocks at centerfold, which is less than the normal magazine backer board I would normally use, and then I put a single cardstock here outside this one and a single cardstock outside that one to try to buffer. And that's about all you're going to be able to do, because if you puff it any more than that, you will sink that staple in. It's not a great one to press, but unfortunately this one does need a press. So you can see the crunching and crinkling down there on the bottom corner, and it also has a little bit of a stacking curl here on the back. So if I put that down, hopefully you can see how the light is distorted over here coming over. So it has both a stacking curl and some bottom edge wear, and so it does need to be pressed. I just really hate doing that issue. All right, next on up here is a Wolverine. This thing has a nasty stacking curl. It's actually a double stacking curl if you look at it there in the light. It also has a lot of what look like fingerprints or streaks on the front cover there. So you can see it right there, right there, right there. These look like oil marks to me. There's some up over there. So that's all going to limit the grade on this one. It is a newsstand copy, and the newsstand copy of this one is much harder to find than a normal one. So I would probably roll the dice and press it. Hopefully, you know, I can buff or polish that out or get some comic clean to help improve those spots. This one's a true modern. It's probably going to be a 9.8. I'm going to skip it. This one's probably going to be a true modern 9.8. Skip it. All right, we got a couple more here. This is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 282. This one does have an insert in the middle, so again, those inserts you kind of got to be aware of. The insert does show age though, so if you look up there, that is going to be tanning relative to the interior or the middle of this, so you can see that color gradient, so that's going to be tanning. You can see some of the rippling. The rippling on the pages will all come out. What's really going to do this one in though is going to be all this writing indent that you can kind of see across there. Now writing, depending on how deep it is and what the intensity, so there's a bunch there right across this guy's thigh, what the bluntness of the utensil was. So a super sharp pointy pencil will not come out. That's going to scratch permanently through the gloss. A really broad ballpoint pen you can get out because the ball on the ballpoint is not sharp enough to rip or damage the gloss. It just takes a heck of a lot of a beating. This, unfortunately though, I think is going to be in the former category, not the latter, and there's going to be too much of it there all in all to get out. What is really concerning is the deep gouges, like right across here. That's still going to show after you press it, even if you do hot shot iron, press, whatever. That's still going to show. It'll look a lot better. It'll be less noticeable. The broader stuff, like right here, you'll be able to get out all the way for sure. But those really deep gouges that are very narrow are going to be permanent scratches, in my opinion. So I would bump that one. All right, last one up here is Wolverine. He's the best there is. This one's got a light stacking curl, you know, and I would just send this one anyway, because even in like a 9.2, you'll be able to get your value out of it probably. There's a little bit of a crease back here. I don't know if that'll come out all the way or not. So it, again, depends on how deep it is, how good the press comes, and if I get an iron in on it. So, but that one is definitely beyond an average wrinkle, I would say. Let's see if I can get it there. This camera really does not want to focus on the white today in front there. Yeah, so anyway, that one's a pretty deep crease. It does go a few pages in, and so usually if I have more than a couple pages in where I can feel it, that's the time to iron. So that one I think has got to be an iron. Cross your fingers for the best and hope. So there you go. All right, this is a heck of a pre-screen video here. 52 comics, if I counted correctly, and we've seen all kinds of defects. And hopefully you've appreciated that. So give me a thumbs up. I'm not going to show you any of the work or progress on these just because it's going to take me literally hours to dry clean all of these and iron them all. But hopefully you enjoyed the video and a little bit of the process. So give the video a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button for you, punch out and share with a friend. And feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for watching, and remember to collect what you enjoy.